Thank you very much, Madam CEO. And I want to thank the leadership for having me here. I think this is my third time. Last year we were at the Safari Park Hotel, and then a few years before that we were in Naivasha. It's always a privilege to come and share ideas and come and share thoughts with people of your caliber. I know my background is in social statistics, so I'm a researcher, and then I got into strategy. My career kicked off in September 1989 at the Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies in Nigeria. So I've been at this for quite a while. And it tickles me whenever people call me a motivational speaker, because the first time I saw that was on the pages of a Kenyan newspaper at a time when I needed motivation myself. So where it came from, I don't know, but it's something that has stuck. All right, but like I said, our focus is on, as an organization based here in Kenya, but we've worked in about 20 African countries, and our focus has been on helping organizations to develop a culture, because a lot of times we spend millions and millions on developing strategies, but a brilliant strategy in a poor culture will never take off. And so that's what we do. And so we're called by people the culture experts, and we also do a lot of research. Now, I looked at what I've been told to speak about, so I will try to stay with the script. And one thing I have done, like you heard from the CEO, I've authored 17 books. And why do I keep writing? I think the secret is in my 17th book, Beyond Intelligence, The Simple Practice of Staying Relevant. I keep writing because my biggest fear on earth is the fear of waking up one morning and the world has moved on without me. I don't know how many of you can handle that, that you wake up and you realize the world doesn't need you anymore. I honestly can't handle that. So I looked at the most relevant people, and I looked at people like Shakespeare, I looked at great authors, and I realized that hundreds of years after they die, people are still quoting them. So I found that a very, very good strategy for remaining relevant. All right? So let's get into this morning's discussion. How many of you feel stressed when life is going just the way you want it to go? Anybody? Okay, let me say that slowly. Is there anybody here who feels stressed when life is going exactly the way you want it to go? Anybody? I thought so. Nobody. All right. As leaders, how many of you feel stressed when you know your team has your back and they will deliver the best all the time? How many of you feel stressed at such moments? Aha. So I think we're getting somewhere. But how many of you are stressed when life is not going the way you expected it to go? I thought so. And then how many of you are stressed when you are doing your best for this team, but this team doesn't have your back and they don't give their best to you? How many of you will be stressed then? So, stress happens when there's a disconnect between expectation and experience. Stress happens whenever you find a disconnect between expectation and experience. The result is stress. And that happens anywhere. I've been married for 27 years, to the same woman, and no extracurricular activities. Now, why has that been possible? Because there was no disconnect between expectation and experience. At the workplace, you get a job, you have expectations, but when there's a disconnect between the expectation and the experience, stress will set in. So it simply means if we want to deal with the stress in our lives, we need to strategically look at how to mitigate against that disconnect. Now, in this industry, and I've seen this particularly in the African continent, one of the causes of the disconnect is the confusion we have in the definitions of two things. We have confused civilization and infrastructural development. And I'll explain that. Many times when we see infrastructural development, automatically we say, oh, that is development. But let me share some thoughts with you. If you look at pictures of the skylines of Lagos, so you have the Lagos skyline with the high-rise buildings, the skyscrapers. You have the Nairobi skyline, Johannesburg, Dubai, Chicago, name it. If you have pictures of those skylines and you don't really know which is which, from those pictures, will you be able to tell which is Africa, which is Asia, which is America? Would you be able to tell? I don't think so. You have the pictures, you're looking at the skylines, and all you see is skyscrapers everywhere. If you did not know that, okay, that is KICC, this is Nairobi, you would not really know. So my question, what exactly is Africa's sustainable development? Reason I'm saying this, you don't want to wake up a few years from now and discover there has been a disconnect between your expectations and experience, because then you will be stressed. What is Africa's sustainable development? I read a book by a man called Lee Kuan Yew, who was the founding father of Singapore. And in that book, he talked about a time when they were moving people literally from the slums, and they had developed high-rise apartments for them. So they moved in there, but you know what? On the 12th floor, people were still rearing their pigs in the balcony on the 12th floor. All right? People refused to use the lift because they were scared, they didn't know how it worked. And they did not use their electric bulbs, they didn't do that. So here you had infrastructural development, but was there civilization? No. And that, I think, is what we need to address so that we don't wake up and find ourselves stressed. On the African continent, we have paid so much attention to infrastructural development, which is right and which should be done. But the only way to sustain our infrastructural development is to ensure we have an accompanying social reorientation. If we are not changing the way we think, we will not be able to sustain the things we put in place. We are stressed because we are trying to fix the things that can be seen at the expense of things that cannot be seen. So, you have a scenario where you have all the infrastructure, but when we show up, we plant our minds there for everybody to see. Am I communicating this morning? So, there are estates. Let me give you an example. There are estates that barely 30 years ago were considered middle upper estates in this Nairobi. Yes or no? When I first came to Nairobi in 1994, I stayed in Kayole. And I used to sell books at Uhuru Park. And people always said, the people in Kayole, they said, when we drove past Buruburu, I said, where is that? They said, that's where the rich people live. So, my dream was that one day I will live in Buruburu, because that's where the rich people live. Then one day, my dad worked for the US government, so one of his partners was around, and they invited us for lunch in a place, for dinner, in a place called Spring Valley. So we drove past Westlands. I did not know that such existed in Kenya. When I got to Spring Valley, I lost my cool. Now, fast forward. Would you still call Buruburu a place where the rich Kenyans live? So what happened? There's a similar place in Nigeria. I hear there are people from Nigeria. Anybody from Nigeria in the room right now? Okay. Lagos has a place called Dolphin Estate, which in the 90s was the address you wanted to have. But today, just like Buruburu, its fortunes have changed. Now, the Empire State Building was built in 1931 and is still a relevant tourist destination and iconic building till this day. The London Underground was commissioned in 1835, thereabouts. Until this day, is still relevant. So, what do we mean by Africa's sustainable development? Because we can leave conferences like this and have strategies for the scene. But if we don't have a strategy to change the way we think and change the way people think, what will happen is that we will have all the wonderful ideas, wonderful infrastructure, but 20, 30 years from today, it will be nothing to write home about. Great houses, for instance, without equally great minds will not last. It will not last. So, from where I sit, as a consultant who has worked with some of the biggest organizations on earth, one of the things I have observed is that people get stressed when they focus more on developing what can be seen without developing what cannot be seen. Relevance has no respect for your title. It has no respect for how rich you are. It has no respect for how intelligent you are. And that is why, if you put intelligence and relevance on a weighing scale, I'm really sad to tell you that relevance will win. Let me give you 2 case studies you can connect with. I'm a student of history and biographies and all that. Now, when I watched a Hillary Clinton campaign, it was a campaign loaded with facts. It was a campaign loaded with logic, with intelligence. And when I watched Donald Trump's campaign, you know the answer. So why then is Donald Trump the president of America today? There was an emotional connection between him and his base. When it comes to, when push comes to shove, I told you we're researchers, so you just have to, we did some research in different organizations, and the question was very simple. Of all the people that work with you, which one will you go out of your way to help to succeed? So they put the names, and then we said, what are the attributes of these people? And they said, somebody who is a good listener, somebody who is helpful, somebody who cares, somebody who goes the extra mile. And they said all that, and not once in so many organizations have we seen people say somebody who graduated with a first class. Not once. What makes you relevant, friends, is not how brilliant you are, but how connected you are with the emotions of those you interact with. That is what makes you relevant. No matter how brilliant you are, if you don't make that emotional connection with people, I'm looking for a nice way to say this, but verily, verily, I say unto you, thou shalt be stressed. So what is our goal as leaders so that we don't get stressed? make sure with all your intelligence, you get the power. Remember Guinness? We've got the power.